This is part 2, and again there was a little bit of a problem with the sound, so similar to last time obviously, but some great stuff in this, so sit down and enjoy. Well, that's interesting because it's almost like that comment you made earlier about Bert Jansch, you know, that about what it is that people do that becomes the, you know, they're good at what they do, if you see what I mean. And there's not necessarily an awful lot of other things outside of that. And maybe that's what tends to happen in the end. You know, like for you, somebody else can come along and look at that and spot it. That this is the thing that really resonates and sets you apart from other people is your guitar playing. And you might not realize that yourself, because there are lots of cases, aren't there, of very famous songs that would never have been released if it was just left to the artist. The songs that they didn't particularly like that became actually the thing that made them. Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are, Roxanne.
Yeah.
You know, that was one that they didn't think was going to be, they didn't want that to be a single. It was Miles Copeland turned around and said, no, that's the one. Yeah. And Carlos Santana's Samba Party, they didn't like the song. You know, you look at that and you go, well, what happened?
Because the artist is too close to it.
Exactly.
Let's talk about Ray Burley here. You know, Ray and I did a lovely album together, and we did big gigs, which eventually led on to the quartet 4-part guitar with John Etheridge and Clive Cole.
Yeah.
But we were looking for material, and I just written this simple little thing called Maddie Goes West. Very simple, picking thing. And I said, "You got anything else?" I said, "Well, I got this." He said, "That's great." And I thought, how could Ray Burley like this? Because Ray is this great scholastic classical guitarist, and he loved it. And all the stuff is really very accessible stuff that I've written. Ray loves. One of his favourite pieces of mine is called Down the River. He loves it. Not technically challenging, not virtuosic at all, by standards of some of the other stuff we've done, and by his standards, you know. And you know, you just don't know, do you? You just toss the stuff out. And I wrote a riff for a friend recently. He'd written this song, and I'd actually created a 12-string guitar track for him to put lyrics to. So it's sort of fun thing to do during this lockdown, isn't it? You work with your mates and do stuff. As long as you're still doing stuff, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
And he said, "What?" He said, "It's great, Gordon." He said, he said, "It needs an extra guitar in that bit." I said, "Okay." And he was around the house, and I played this thing. I said, "Well, that sort of thing." He said, "That's great." And then I thought about it. I thought, well, this is quite good. I'd literally just played it off the cuff without thinking about it. Another thing I've written recently, just knocked out some chords, again, for this friend of mine's song. And you play it, and you go, "That's great." You go, "Is it? Oh, I suppose I better revisit it. Maybe if it's that good, I should think twice about it."
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
I'm loving chatting to you about the inspiration thing, and I'd like to talk more about that because of the books and spirituality, if that's okay with you. Yeah, about the philosophy thing as well. I've, as you probably know, 5 years ago I was very ill, and since then I've had a series of ongoing surgery, but at this point in time I'm fine. But of course, it did. When you're faced with your own mortality, it does kind of it shrinks your world down to a pinhead.
Yes.
And everything you thought was important was not important.
Yes.
And you start thinking of really what is important. It's not that I didn't know what was important, but you get so bloody wrapped up with career, the next album, the next gig, What can I do to get more money in from gigs? What can I do to get more recognition? You know, and you're chasing after something that is just really a nonsense. So that stopped me short in my tracks, and it then led me into certain areas of spirituality, metaphysics, philosophy, and I started reading Eckhart Tolle
Mhm.
um, and lots of other great books. Um, and that's been a profound influence actually, and it's really the main guiding force in my life now. And whenever I have chats with Pete, Peter Townsend, we're talking about his major influence was Mayor Barber, and very recently, thank goodness, a friend of mine said you should get this book. It's called The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, which is a very profound book. I got that. That was life changing. It's great to have things that are life changing when you're old, isn't it?
Yes. Well, it tends to work that way, really.
Yeah. And I mentioned to Pete, I said to him, have you ever read a book called The Autobiography of a Yogi? He said, of course. Of course I have, because it's a classic. And so we talk about that, and we talk about, spirituality and the Maharishi. And I said, why weren't you part of that? Because you would have thought you would have been then, because Donovan was there and the Beatles and Mia Farrow and all those people. That searching that what they were going towards, and of course transcendental meditation, which is, I believe, still a good thing, although I haven't embraced it.
Oh yeah, no, it is a big thing still. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said the reason I didn't, he said, because I thought I couldn't meditate. And he said I still have trouble in that area. I think his brain is so active. But he then, for him, he discovered Maya Barber. He still embraces that. He said because I've never felt the need to look elsewhere. Not there aren't other paths. There are many paths to what you consider to be the truth or the divine. And I find that so interesting. And for me, at the moment, at this point in my life, I've embraced Paramahansa Yogananda, and I'm going down that path. And it's the only thing that makes sense to me, really. I think it was Sadhguru who said, "An unexamined life is a wasted life."
Yes.
And I think that's true. Some people, they're so involved with the periphery of things. And
I've got a feeling actually there's somebody else. I was going to say it's not obviously Plato. It's somebody from the Western tradition.
Probably, maybe he was quoting somebody from the Western tradition.
Yeah.
It's all these great spiritual masters, that have made a mark. And really, at the end of the day, whether it be Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, it's all really saying the same thing.
Yes, it is.
The purest form of it, And of course, a lot of it's been corrupted, but it's all seeking that truth that is only can be found within,
Yes.
which gets back to inspiration. Where do we find it? We find it within. We find it within our consciousness, and that's the thing that they don't talk about these days. I mean, the medical profession, they'll hopefully make you better through medicine, but it's not holistic.
Yeah.
The whole holistic thing is psychological. But even now they're saying, they're putting forward mindfulness. Eckhart Tolle, being in the moment, the power of now.
I'll tell you somebody who's very, very, very hot on this. Actually, his last couple of books have sort of looked at the benefits of sort of spiritual practices, and that's Rupert Sheldrake.
Oh, let's write that down.
Yeah. Well, Rupert Sheldrake is the guy who came out with the morphic resonance hypothesis, that if something is done, the next time somebody attempts that thing, it becomes easier to do. And it's a fascinating theory. but I he's I think the best thing to do is actually have a listen. You can get a lot of the books on Audible.
Mm.
And I think it's called Spiritual Practices. Book 2 is particularly good. And that's worth having a listen to, because he sort of ties up my interest in music comes from that sort of thing about, why did we have music beyond, if you go back in time, it wasn't about people performing somewhere. It was doing something state changing. It was a practice, a spiritual practice. That's what music was doing, as was any other form of art. And we've sort of commoditized a lot of things and lost that link. And I think that's the point, that when you're playing and things just flow, we call state of flow, let's say, when you're playing, that state of consciousness is very, very similar across lots of things, whether that's some sort of meditation state, or playing sport when everything is just happening. It's a very intriguing state of consciousness. And I think that we've lost, we experience that when we play, when things go well, if you see what I mean, or you don't even know, you're not even caring whether things go well anymore, type of idea, and it all begins to flow. But, and I think people like Sheldrake are beginning to sort of point science back into that direction of going, look, this is an important experience. And we've made those experiences slightly mundane, if you see what I mean, because we're just playing music, you know what I mean? Whereas, no, this is incredibly important. And if you going back to sort of people who, through their music, influenced the world, obviously The Who is a good example. But you think about the Beatles and what they actually did with those pieces of music. It's quite possible they kicked off the whole flower power thing, the Beatles. I mean, because somebody actually said the Beatles quote the word love more than any other band ever. And I think, it's almost like a mantra.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've just written down here Robert Sheldrake, and I've also written underneath Universal Consciousness.
Yeah, so Rupert Sheldrake.
Rupert, sorry.
Rupert,
yeah. Oh, yeah, Rupert. Yeah, Rupert.
And you check him out. He's an interesting guy. And there's a lot of other people sort of similar, but he's the guy who sort of stuck his head above the parapet first as a scientist and said, look, hang on a minute. We're missing something here, going just down a sort of materialist point of view.
It's a bit like the quantum mechanics thing, isn't it? Which is another mystical thing, which nobody's ever sussed out.
Totally.
Particles a million miles apart react at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you view them, they change.
Yes. And the interesting point is that one of the theories, things like entanglement, quantum entanglement, is that the electrons must know the future in order to be where they are. Now that really does your head in, because for them to turn from wave to particle, the split aperture test thing.
Oh yes.
They seem to have to know where they're going to be in the future. So it's almost like the future's drawing the present to itself. And of course, once you try to wrap your head against that, it's like, okay, that's a bit weird. Everything's back to front now.
See what Eckhart Tolle said. He calls it the unseen, and it's true. And I think that a lot of people, it's like coincidence. I could tell you so many things that have happened in my life since I was ill.
Yeah.
Coincidences. It goes beyond it. It goes beyond the coincidence. Everything is kind of preordained. We're meant to meet certain people, certain schools of thought. I mean, I'll give you an example of this, and I don't mind sharing this with your listeners. I think it's great. about 2 or 3 years ago, I and my wife were invited to a wedding. We live in the Midlands, in Sutton Coldfield, and the wedding was the other side of Bristol, 150 miles away from here, roughly. And I found myself at a table with this elderly couple, and this chap was very distinguished looking chap, and I said to him, uh, "What do you do for a living? What has brought you here?" I guess he was retired. He said, "I'm a retired GP." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." So immediately we're chatting about. I said, "Your time as a GP, did you ever have any dealings with the staff or the surgeons at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital?" Is where I had my surgery, and I met the most amazing people. Well, I think they're on a different planet. When you meet great surgeons, you just want to get down on your knees and go like this.
Yeah.
That's why I hate the term guitar hero. Crawl, and I get angry about it. I mean, on stage I say this,
Yeah.
But I mean, I want a thing called regularly called the Guitar Heroes at the BBC, and it's nice to be on the telly, but you say, no, we're not heroes. You just play the bloody guitar.
Yeah.
Real heroes are doctors and nurses and people who sweep the floors in hospitals and surgeons and social workers and people who work in hospices. They're the real heroes, not me. I just play the bloody guitar, So I get very angry about that. But anyway, so I said to him, did you ever meet any of the surgeons? He said, yeah, one or two. I said, well, my consultant surgeon was a man called Professor David Gurovich. He said, yes. He said his father and my father were prisoners of war together.
Amazing.
What's the chances of that?
Oh no, I know. This is exactly another thing. Yeah, I know.
And he was telling me about his father was a man called Arnold Gurovich, who was a legendary surgeon. And I had the great privilege of knowing his son, or meeting his son, because his son was my consultant surgeon, who's Professor David Gurovich. You meet these people, and they're just so charismatic. You just, this is an extraordinary human being. And lots of other things. Lots of other things. I mean, prior to being poorly in 2015, about 2 years prior to that, I said to Hillary, I said, I'm not gigging every day of the week. Well, it'd be nice to have had loads of gigs like we all do. You sort of equate success with lots of gigs, therefore I'm successful. And I said, I've got all this time. I said, I'm thinking of getting in touch with the local hospice and just offering my services and just popping in and playing to somebody, no matter who it is, but not going in as Gordon Giltrap, just Gordon. So I sent an email to the local hospice and look, my name is Gordon, I live in Sutton Coldfield, I play the guitar, I'd like to offer my services, come into the centre at some point. And lady responded to me and she said, can we have a meeting? I said, a meeting was arranged. I actually went to the wrong branch of the hospice. I went to the day centre. And chatted to a lovely lady there called Judith, incredible lady. And she said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I play the guitar. And she didn't know who I was, which is fine. And I said, well, would you like to hear what I do? So I showed her some clips on YouTube. She said, oh, this is fantastic. Would you come and play for us? I said, sure. So it was arranged on a Thursday, which is the MS group there on a Thursday. So I turns up with the guitar. And for a Thursday, it was quite packed. And a couple of chaps came up to me, oh, hi, Gordon, can you sign my album? And I'm like, oh, and do you do a request? Would you play? And suddenly I've got a little group of fans, which I wasn't expecting. This led on to me doing quite a few appearances at the centre. And I also did 2 fundraising gigs at a local church and raised a few thousand quid for them, which is lovely. Little did I know at the time that I was going to be ill.
Right.
And in actual fact, knowing these lovely people, I kind of bypassed the system and they organised some counselling for me. And they introduced me to a lovely lady called Kim Quantz who did Reiki and energy field healing.
Yeah.
Which had a great effect on me, changed my life.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I hadn't done that, where was this path leading? If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have met these people. Now, in all honesty, would I have liked to have gone through that I've just been through again for the sake of meeting these people, because I've met the most extraordinary people. And I suppose the answer would be no. I don't want to have half my stomach removed and this, that,
Yeah.
and the other. You know, you don't want that.
Don't,
But
don't you think that's often the way that when you get these life-changing experiences, they would have been the thing that you would have avoided at all costs,
absolutely,
right? Whether that's the end of a relationship or, a car accident or, just something like that that changes, that really changes where you are in that moment in time. There's only in reflection you look back and you go, if it wasn't for that, this wouldn't have happened. And, I
yeah.
have to look at that.
Yeah.
You
You've
know,
had the same experience, similar experience.
sorry?
Can you relate to that yourself?
Oh my God, yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, from the start, you were saying about coincidences, for me, my life is one series of bizarre synchronicities and coincidences. I mean, to the point where you get things stack up in such ways that are, even one would be statistically out of the ordinary. But when you get suddenly 4 or 5 things stack up, you're just sort of thinking, this is bonkers. How can that be like that? But life-changing events. I had a health issue, actually. 2 years ago, I had a heart attack, completely out of the blue. And just didn't, not a classic pain down the arm or pain in the jaw or anything like that. I just felt a bit odd. And it was strange because I picked a car up I dropped my car off in the garage to be checked over, brought this other car back. And then when I was driving back, I had a leather jacket on. I just thought my arms feel like this jacket feels heavy on my arms. It's weird. To get home, thought, just don't feel quite right. And then I sort of sat quietly for a while and didn't go away. And then my wife was still in bed. She doesn't sleep very well generally, and I went into the room, and then I said to her, I actually don't feel very well. And she was asleep. And as soon as I said that, she woke up, sat up. And at that moment, I just went into like a faint. That's the only way I could put it. And I thought, oh my God, what's going on? And I started to see things. Somebody standing on the landing. I thought, oh, crikey. Looks like I'm going, It was that sort of profound. Anyway.
Who did you see standing on the landing? Was it a paramedic?
It was a man standing on the landing. Yeah. It was just like, and I'd sort of, and then things started to, look like the walls were becoming, like you could see through the walls and stuff like this. And I thought, oh, God, here we go. Fortunately, my wife's a herbalist. So she brought in this bottle of hawthorn brandy, which she makes. She tinctures stuff. So she said, drink that. She called the ambulance and everything. And I drank this, and it literally brought me back. It was like, bang, I was sort of back. When the ambulance people turned up, they took my pulse and my blood pressure, and they were like, okay, well, that seems all right. And they were sort of like scratching their heads and said, well, we'll just pop you down into the ambulance and put you on the, wire you up. Wired me up. They went, oh, you've had a heart attack. So they said, right, okay, we'll try and get you into Brighton, because that's the best place. So it's between Brighton and Hayward Heath. So Brighton said they'd take me. I literally got there, came out into the theatre, had the operation, back out. That was fine. But 2 days later, I was in the hospital and was just about to leave on the Wednesday. And then that night, I had a very strange experience. I woke up and I felt like part of my thinking was over there. That's the only way I could explain it. I thought, that's really odd. And I just thought, it's the medication. Anyway, I had a stroke. I was having a stroke. I didn't know until the following morning, and I couldn't speak. So it was like, okay, it's really odd. But the interesting thing was, before that all happened, I had a strange dream. And this is the point I'm making. I think it was the day before I had the heart attack. I woke up. So I was in that sort of state, between waking. And I could see myself going down a hill, sort of country lane. And it suddenly turned very sharply to the right. And I sort of thought, what's around the corner? And this voice in my head said, we're not showing you that. It's like, okay, like, what's this all about? And then the next thing, I'm going up a hill. And it was like one of the sort of country lanes in Cornwall, there's some rocks at one side and all that sort of stuff, And the sun was coming up. Anyway, when I had the stroke, it was on the left side of my body, on my left side of my brain, so it affected my right side. But that's where I turned, if you see what I mean. Because it was like, then you go like, okay. Now, people can just go, oh, that's, but inside, you go, no. That was definitely a premonition of what that was. And it was literally, the day before. And that's pretty, when you reflect on it, you go like, okay. And of course, then it changes the way you think, how you think about things, and where you are in the scheme of things and all the rest of it. That's what it's done for me anyway. And there are lots of things like that happened to me. But that was because it was sort of profound, if you like, for me. But again, same thing, brilliant hospital. And it's those sort of things where, as you say, those people who do that work, caring for other people, there's not enough respect. But so and it does change your sort of focus on things, and it makes you sort of look at stuff and reflect on things in the past and sort of go, and that means I get a deeper sense of what that's all about, whether it's your music or events in life, and people that you meet that maybe that you thought you didn't like, and then you think, hang on a minute, maybe they had something that they were dealing with that I don't understand, and all that. It just really deepens your.
I think that's really good. It's like you meet certain people in life and they can say something that might be a bit offensive, and then you sort of step back from it. There's a great book called The Four Agreements, and it's certain rules in life. Never take anything personally. Never assume anything. Be immaculate with your speech. You be very careful what you say. Be immaculate with your speech. But this thing about taking things personally, if somebody offends you or upsets you, they've usually got their own issues. It's not you.
Yes, that's right.
They've got their own problems, and we've all been there.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm very, very touched.
Yes, my God. I mean, I tend to, when these conversations go where they go, and that's good, because I think, especially when, and I often get this actually when I listen to people when they talk, they have stories that really resonate with me. And it could be all sorts of stuff, like obviously for you, you're interested in music and what you're saying about the creative process, and that the music comes through, the music that comes through you is your expression. It comes from somewhere else, but it comes, I don't just become somebody else. You can learn by studying what other people do, but it has to become your story in a way.
And what is your role now, Vic, do you feel, in the whole grand scheme of things, as a teacher, as a musician, as a educationalist? Is that the right word?
Well, yeah, I like to call it trickster, really.
Yeah.
I like to trick people into realizing how good they are. There's a lot of things where I think that's my sort of role, to just make people realize that they're amazing. People are amazing.
Yeah. I think that's true.
And everybody's got a story to tell.
I just love what you're doing about the idea of teaching, bringing out people's creativity. That's such a great thing to do.
Yeah, and I mean, really, to be honest, that sounds more grand than it is, because people are creative anyway, but they just don't realise they are in a lot. And you've only just got to allow them to do that.
That's right. You're just bringing it out, and it's there. You're just unlocking the door. It's really lovely that we're chatting today about the method thing, and I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes. Well, we better talk about this because nobody knows about this on here, so we'll explain. You used to teach at Mepham School in Kent for a while, didn't you?
I did, and I had over the years, I've actually, as a chap, got in touch with me. I had two students at that time that have got in touch with me all these years on and said what a profound influence I'd had on them and how it was life changing for them.
Yeah.
I didn't realise. It was wonderful. I just wondered whether you got any feedback from my time there, because there was a lad there, and he was a school tough boy. He was really defiant. And I taught him, and there was the school concert at the end of the year. And I said, Brian, you're really good. And I said, I would have loaned you a guitar for the concert. And I loaned him a Les Paul Custom. Right? And he guarded it with his life. He was so good. And when it was parents' evening, because I'm not a trained teacher, I was just, a pathetic thing, but the parents' evening, his mum and dad came up and said, he's changed, you've changed him. This, you can't thank you enough. He's made a big difference in his life. And he was the only kid in that school that insisted on calling me sir.
Yeah.
But you think you'd be the rebel? Oh, I'm not calling him sir. All the other kids would call me Mr. Giltrap or Gordon or whatever they fancy calling me, And it was lovely. Of course, my late son went to that school. You see, that's a very strong emotional connection.
Yes.
And maybe one day, please God, I'll come back and we'll do a concert with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, they've transformed it. It's been rebuilt.
Really?
Yeah, but it's one of the highest achieving schools in Kent.
Really?
But of course, you left the teaching there, and I took over.
Yeah, at the time I felt, I suppose I was in a new relationship, and I felt that I ought to do something that could bring a bit of income in for a start, and the teaching's always been there, and that was it. So I applied, and then the head office that was at Canterbury. Was it at Canterbury? No,
possibly.
No, Maidstone.
Right, County Council. Yeah.
Maidstone. There was a head office there, and they were going to create a full-time post for me there.
Oh,
they was going to create. It was going to be called the Rock School or whatever.
Yeah.
And I said, thank you. I said, I can't do this because I've still got a career, and I knew I need to get out and do gigs and concerts and make albums. So I couldn't have the time. But I felt very flattered and honoured that they were going to create this course.
Yeah.
Just for me, Yeah. But somebody more qualified took over, which was you. And I'm
well, I don't know if I was actually, to be quite honest. I think
I'm still doing it. I think it's great, No,
but I think what happened was that because I was doing some teaching at adult education, and I was only, like don't know how old I was, about 20, I think. But I'd just done some sort of courses in London to do with like, I did this, what was it called? It was some sort of music business course, but it was punk musicians and stuff had run it. You know, it was really, really good. And of course, I'd just done that, and I'd gone down to the Adult Education Centre down in Gravesend, Victoria's Centre, I think it was called. And I said, well, you need somebody to teach guitar. And they went, well, we've already got one of them, but do you do anything else? And I said, I do something about getting band on the road type of thing and all the pitfalls and, you know, all the tricks of the trade. And they went, yes, do that. So I started doing that. And then the principal came to see me to say that you were leaving Mepham. Would I be interested? So that's how I found out about it. And just went along. And I think I had a much more of a punk hairdo at the time.
Good for you.
So I think I looked the part.
All the big kids used to think I was in status quo. What do you equate as status quo, sir? When I was in hospital recently, I was in hospital this time last year. I had a lung infection. No big deal. It's important, great, you know. And I went down to have an MRI scan, and the lady said, "We know that name. Weren't you in Black Sabbath?"
That's great. You just said no. I had some of the robes. No.
No, I think it's great. So all these years on, you're still doing it, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you. I mean, you're still doing.
Well, yeah. Well, it's great, you know. But in terms of, you know, you're doing serious teaching. Didn't we meet up at a teacher seminar?
Yeah, we did a few times. We've sat and chatted. The RGT, that's sort of conferences and stuff. Yeah. Was that the only time we met? There wasn't any others. I don't know. I've got a feeling we probably met somewhere else as well, because
was it one at Marwell Zoo?
Sorry?
Marwell, a place called Marwell. Down in Sussex, West Sussex possibly? I can't remember now.
I don't know, not sure.
No. Would have been you.
Sure.
But your memories really would have been at RGT where we meet up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few times we met up at RGT, and obviously I know Ray and
yeah, I used to love doing those. Because
John Esrich through the RGT, and you know.
Yeah, it's a great thing. And now I'm legit. Of course, they've got the graded Giltrap thing, which I thought was fantastic. You know, I thought, blimey, finally arrived. I can't hardly read a note of music, but there's all these youngsters.
Yeah, but you're in good company, aren't you?
So, I mean, tell me a bit more about yourself, buddy. I mean, that picture of you're sort of toting a very nice electric guitar. Do you see yourself more as an electric player than anything else?
I probably am, really. To be honest, I don't really know what I am anymore. Really.
You probably can do it all, can't you? That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, because I think for a long time, because I've done such a lot of work more educationally, you know, and I do projects which involve other people who are amateurs and kids and stuff, you know, doing recordings with, you know, putting them in with a sort of pro band and recording with them and stuff. I've done a lot of that. I find that exciting.
Yeah.
You know, because it always puts you on the back foot, because you don't know what's going to happen. And I really like that. You know, I like to sort of fly by the seat of my pants a lot, you know, which is sort of fits that sort of contemporary, improvised, you know, you're going to play a song, but it could go anywhere type of thing.
When I saw you with that guitar, I thought that looks like a serious shredding guitar. I thought, I bet.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm not a. Yeah, I can, but I don't. If you see what I mean. You see,
is that the type and he can, but he doesn't. It's like it's a man who plays the bagpipes that doesn't.
Well, it's not quite as. No. I mean, a lot of my influences are, well, anything. Like you mentioned Wes Montgomery, but you know, Santana, Hendrix, Benson, anybody, you know, that catches my ear really. All the bluesmen, Albert King, you know, B.B. King, Freddie King, all of those guys, but a lot of jazz players, a lot of, all sorts of things, and also lots of other stuff, Indian music and anything, just what catches my ear. And I do a lot of, I won't say I do a lot of songwriting, a lot of other people doing songwriting. That's something I do a lot of now. And I enjoy that. And I find that a mystical experience, how you can put things together and almost totally random, and you end up with something that is like really unbelievably interesting. And then you craft it and teach people how to do that. So it's good.
I feel we haven't touched enough on the anorak stuff today, but I hope you're happy with what we've spoken about.
No, it's been brilliant. It's been brilliant because I think this is the type of stuff when people think about music or creativity. If I'd heard something like this as a kid starting out, that would have really opened my mind about what it's about. It's not a case of like we've got the textbook map, this is how you do it. It's not that. It's the fact that there are lots of ways of doing things, but they're not necessarily what you're told is the way to do it. You've got to develop your own path and look to other people for inspiration, and be motivated by other things. But don't just become a clone of somebody else.
I've always felt that. There's so many people spend 3 years at a music college or an academy, and they all come out, obviously they've learned certain skills, but they all come out sounding like Joe Satriani or Alan Holdsworth or whoever, which is great, but that's not teaching them creativity.
But the thing is, there's only one Alan Holdsworth.
Exactly.
And there's only one Joe Satriani.
I don't know if you remember, you're probably too young, but there used to be a guitar teacher on TV called John Pierce. And he was one of the first people to teach guitar on television. He said he was a program called Hold Down a Chord.
Oh, yes, I do know, yeah.
John was a great guy, he was a good friend. And around about 1970, 71, I was listening a lot to Django Reinhardt. And I thought, I've got to learn how to do this stuff. So I was kind of getting a fairly good handle on it, My plectrum technique was kind of coming on a bit. And I could play Honeysuckle Rose a little bit and analyse the chords. And I got in touch with John. I said, John, I wonder if you can help me. I want to get a McAfee guitar, which you could buy relatively cheaply in those days. He said, why do you want a McAfee chord? He said, I can get you one. He said, there's a man called Louis Gallo who has got these little esoteric Django Reinhardt appreciation groups around the country. These old boys get together. He said, why do you want a McAfee? I said, I want to sound like Django. I want to play like Django. He said, but why do you want to play like Django? I said, why? This is fantastic, isn't it? He said, Gordon. And I did, again, it's a revelation to me. He said, don't you realise, he said, you have got the most unique guitar style I've ever heard. He said, nobody sounds like you. I said, really? He said, yes. He said, there's only ever going to be one Django Reinhardt. He said, be you, be Gordon Giltrap. Yeah. And I thought, it was the best piece of advice anybody could have given me. And I've been around a long time. This is like 1970, 71. I'd made 2 or 3 albums. But it just needed that voice of wisdom to say, be yourself.
Yeah.
You can't be anything else. You just said it. There's only one Joe Satriani. You can study the techniques of Holdsworth. But Alan was born with these massive hands and this strange brain. Yes. And Johnny Etheridge told me, he said, Alan had a terrible childhood. So whatever drives you, whatever conditions you, it's all conditioning to be the way you or not the way you are, because the way you are really, I think it's so easy for us to be defined by what we do as opposed to what we are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And whatever was happening in Alan's life, that's what came out. And Johnny Etheridge, he knew Clapton a while back, and he said people tend to forget. He said, "Listen, Clapton, oh great, his time with the Blues Breakers and all this great stuff." He said, "But you don't understand." He said, Clapton was a very tortured soul, And this stuff was coming out, was his way of getting it out of himself. He wasn't copying anybody else. He was influenced by B.B. King and Freddie King. But what came out was this cry of anguish that came out in the music. And everybody goes, oh, isn't that fantastic? Which it was. But you can't teach that.
No.
Can't teach it.
You can't teach it. But that's the thing, is people need to find it in themselves.
Yeah. You can say, look, this is an influence. Us as teachers will go, listen to this. What do you think? Has this touched you? Isn't this good? What is great about this? What's great about Mark Knopfler? His creativity, his tone. The fact that he could play more, but he doesn't. He's got great, he can play faster if he wants to and has done in the past.
Yeah.
But it's his tone, his creativity.
Yeah.
And how do I get that sound? Well, Bob Dylan. I don't know if you ever read Bob Dylan's book, Chronicles.
No.
He was talking about a musician that I had the privilege of seeing years ago in the 60s called Mike Seeger. He was a younger brother of the great Pete Seeger.
Yeah.
He was playing at Les Cousins one night, which was the club to go to if you wanted to hear diverse stuff. Everybody played there. I saw John McLaughlin play there.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. With Danny Thompson. It's called the Pete Brown Poetry Band. Pete Brown was the guy who wrote the lyrics for Cream, you probably know.
Yeah. Pete Brown.
And I just went down there one night, I didn't know what to expect. Redbone was in the audience as well. And this black guy off the stage, he was rocking black and forth in this music. I thought, who is this guy? It's John McLaughlin. Anyway, I saw this Mike Seeger there, and this man could do anything. He was a brilliant guitar player. He could play ragtime, he could play bluegrass, he could play the alto harp, the fiddle, the Appalachian dulcimer, frailing banjo, perfectly, brilliantly. Because he was part of that, his brother was Pete Seeger, so he's part of that tradition. But the man was a genius. And Dylan says, he said he saw Mike Seeger the other night. He said, I saw Mike Seeger. He said, and he was amazing. He said, I thought, how can I be as good as Mike Seeger? He said, and it occurred to me, the only way I can be as good as Mike Seeger is to be Mike Seeger. The same as Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck can sound like Jeff Beck, whatever guitar he's playing.
Yes.
And people have said that about me. Put a guitar in my hands, I sound like me.
Yes.
Put a guitar in your hands, you're just going to sound like Vic Island.
Yes. Well, it's the classic thing, with people going around trying to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan. But there's sort of clips of Stevie Ray Vaughan playing a 12-string guitar, right? And he sounds like Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah.
He didn't need the Strat. Because he didn't always sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, and that's the way it goes,
And Julian Bream said this, people think if they get the right guitar, the right strings, and they're going to sound like this person. Bream said, he said, I could probably get this in his book, God rest his soul, a book called The Life on the Road. He said, I could probably get a reasonable sound out of any old now, he said. He said, I'd rather not. He said, but it's not the guitar, it's the player at the end of the day. And he said, if you're blessed with good nails, that's a good start to be a classical player because you'll get the tone, upright and down projection. Ray Burley's blessed with good nails.
Yes.
Ray has got the most sublime tone, And it's true, people think, oh, I want to sound like Hank Marvin. If I get the Hank Marvin Strat and a Benson Echoplex and this, that, and the other, I'll sound like Hank. No, you won't. You'll just sound like somebody's trying to sound like him.
Yeah, I know.
We know there are certain physical attributes that to being a good player. Good hands help. Mark Knopfler, as you know, was born left-handed, but he played right-handed, so he had incredible strength. Gary Moore, left-handed player, played right-handed.
Yeah.
It's immense left-hand strength, which made a great difference to the execution. I don't have strong fingers. My fingers are pretty weak. That's why I use fairly light strings and namby-pamby low action,
A bit like me.
Yeah, well, I like me light gauge strings, but it's what you're born with at the end of the day. Holter has like a bunch of bananas, massive thing.
Yeah.
So it could do those stretches, and and that, again, it's what you're born with.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Gordon, that's been brilliant. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. It's so nice to talk to you.
You've got my email and phone number anyway, haven't you? I gave you that.
Yeah.
Stay stay in touch.
What I'll do is don't disappear when I turn the recording off. So I'll say goodbye now, but hang on. All right. I normally say all that. But so thanks again. That was brilliant.
It's been a pleasure. I hope your listeners enjoy all this stuff.
Yes, of course they do. They have to put up with me rambling.
Okay.
So great thanks to Gordon for that. And I really enjoy doing these podcasts, but this particular episode's great because I've not really had chance to talk to Gordon in this much detail for such a long time. We often used to have a quick chat at the RGT conferences, but that was normally sitting down, having something to eat at lunchtime in between lectures and stuff like that. But anyway, good to see him and have a chat, and I hope you enjoyed that. And so until next time, see you then.